Welcome to the final episode of our Understanding the Investor Mindset theme. I think our last episode is going to be the most important, Suzanne. We've had some great conversations about understanding the deal from all angles, the seller's perspective, building a team, and then taking away the fear of the vacancy, right? That turnover process and getting in the new tenant, and what that mindset shift can do for an investor. Lastly, what we're going to talk about is laws and regulations, being prepared for anything. I think one of the riskiest things an investor can do is invest in an area or invest in a property without knowing the local zoning laws, the regulations that are in place that need to be, up to standard for your property to, even be in existence and, be able to allow a tenant into your property. So there's so many things that can really put an investor's mind at ease if they know these up front. And we have a pretty long list, but I can't wait to get into it because I guarantee an investor is going to learn a lot in today's episode.
Well, you said a key word is local, and zoning is town by town.
Yeah.
So what even abutting towns can have very different requirements. So that is something you truly need to understand prior to heading down that path.
Yeah. And before we get into specifics, just, failure to perform this due diligence ahead of time can really lead to fines, substantial fines, profit loss, and really sink your portfolio. And it's all because of some, it can be considered confusing. You can say you don't know where to find it, but really as an investor, it's all on you to, knock on the door of town hall if you have to, and really figure out what you can do with your property, what the zoning laws are, if there's any, investment things that you should be aware of because your house is classified as an investment property, all important to know. So let's get right into it.
Well, check with your code officer. You should not consider them a foe. They are your friend. You should start with them and understanding. They know the nuance of every asset in that town, and that's really what you want to understand. Is can this be in a rental area? There may be rental restrictions. In Portland, Maine, they are putting some timelines on rental restrictions and how many properties can fall in that. Make sure you do your due diligence before you enter into that path.
Those people can become your foe, but that's typically when you owe them a lot of money because you failed to do something, right? So keeping them as your friend, keeping them as a resource, they want to help
Sure.
the investors, right? Because, in real estate investments can do a lot for a local area, can bring in tourists, there's so many positives that come from having people that invest in real estate in a specific town, county, or state. So they want to help them flourish. But sometimes it's their job to collect fines from you because you failed to do something before purchasing a property.
Well, and we hear every town, county, and state has a housing shortage. So let's go about this the right way and find a way to make it in a respectable space that we can all move forward in.
Exactly. So the due diligence before the purchase, right? Let's get into that. The contracts and contingencies. Make sure that all purchase agreements are in writing. They have the inspection contingencies, the financing, the clear title, right? That's really how you get off on the right foot, is if those contracts are written, they've been reviewed by legal people that you trust, and you're ready to go, right? Anything without a legally binding contract is nothing, essentially.
Well, and there's a lot of things that you want to really do as part of the due diligence. And we touched a little bit earlier on working with the title companies, but you want them to come and really, one, see if there's mechanic liens on the property,
Mhm.
but also as you're acquiring that, are there any issues with that? Have they gone over any of the boundary lines? Does the corner of the garage really belong on the neighbor's property? Those are the things that you want to, and those can be rectified. It's not a showstopper, but you can say, I'll take this slice of the pie for my garage, and I'll give you this slice of the pie, so that the lot square footage stays the same. It's the boundary line that changes that can make or break the transaction, but do it on the forefront. Don't wait until the end to try and figure it out.
It's a showstopper depending on when you realize that it's an issue, right? So the zoning and land use is another big area. You really want to confirm that what you're using the property for is what it's designated for, right? A couple examples right off the bat can be single family, multifamily, mixed use, or commercial, right? If you're not in tune with what that zoning code is and you plan to do something different with the property, be prepared to pay some fines, lose some money, potentially lose the property.
The
Exactly.
build may not go.
So
And even know understanding some of that is is it a condo or that and are there HOA fees? I'm still surprised that HOA reigns in first position
mhm.
on some of these transactions. I think that I would say the financing company should be there,
Yeah.
but the HOA really is your first roadblock that you have to
Yep.
make sure you can jump over that hurdle.
Yep. And then lastly, really what you want to be concerned about is environmental hazards. These can really affect tenants that you put in place in a property, and you're going to be the one that's paying the price for having someone come into a property with, there's risks such as asbestos, which I know is kind of getting faded out, but it still exists in some pockets of the country. You have lead-based paint, underground storage or sewage tanks. So there's so many things that you really need to be prepared for from a environmental perspective.
And a sewage tank or the septic fields, you don't want it. You want to make sure that if you put and tenants don't truly understand a lot of the nuances that go with that.
Yes.
You can't wash your paintbrushes out. That'll actually ruin a septic field
Yep.
quicker than anything else. But you also make sure that they're not overpopulating the house. So you don't have it's a 3 bedroom house, but it's 6 college kids that are living there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's just you can't don't you got to understand the boundaries, don't overuse it. Make sure that what you're doing fits within the boundaries and what the house can actually produce.
Yep. Don't be afraid to schedule regular checkups or check-ins with those as well. It's well within your right, like you said, to make sure that if you signed a contract that says I'm renting this house to 3 people, that 3 people are living there, and then the first week they didn't have their 3 boyfriends or girlfriends move in, or their family from out of the country moved in once they secured your property. So you can use things to your advantage as the landlord to go check on things and make sure that even from an environmental perspective, like you said, you're taking care of that septic system that you have in place, because those can be extremely expensive depending on the repair that you need to do to them.
Are you dumping bacon grease down
Yeah.
there? I mean, there's so many things that some people don't understand that just so you know that this house does have a septic field, and these are the things that you need to be aware of, just to educate them. But there's a lot of ways to and you're gonna know based upon water consumption.
Yeah.
How many people are actually living there? Did your water bill triple? Month over month. So there's a lot of things that you can do, but make sure you've given your contracts the language that you need to protect
Yeah.
you and the boundaries that you set on behalf of your resident.
Yep. Goes back to before anybody sets foot in the house, you really have to make sure that you're protecting yourself from all angles. And it sounds like a hassle, but there's a big learning curve for people that move in to well water or septic tanks, and being able to educate them so so you have peace of mind as a real estate investor. I think is a super important step that you can't overlook.
And if you have well water, make sure you test the water.
Mhm.
Is there radon in it? Is there lead in it? Make sure that at the time that you're transitioning to a new tenant, that you've done a couple of basic things that ensure you're protecting them as well as yourself.
Mhm. So then you have building and safety codes, right? We go another step further. A lot of these can be at the state and local level, but make sure you're always up to date on the state's compliance codes and laws. That's when you're going to want to be reaching out to town hall. Who is the person that I can get in contact with to make sure that this is up to snuff, right? I don't want to be purchasing a property or then purchasing a property and renting it out to tenants if there's safety codes that this property is violating. So again, it's all about that due diligence ahead of time.
And this is, where end-to-end solutions comes into they manage not only whether you've got a tenant that's stayed beyond their
Mhm.
time frame, but also they are aware of all of the local nuances that require from exiting a tenant properly to all of these things. So we're talking about gaining the tenant, but what do you do? We've certainly seen some trespass issues that come up, and how do you properly manage that?
Yeah.
Even going down to how do you properly refund the security deposit.
Yeah.
You can't hold on to that. And there's timelines. Every town's different. So make sure that you understand, the boundaries that are set
For
for.
sure. That's something that we'll get into more detail later on in the episode. I can't wait to educate some investors about that. But then you have local permit requirements as well. These really pop up, I would think, for multifamily projects that you're looking to complete or multifamily properties that you're investing in. There's a whole other layer of security that goes into it when you're talking about fire sprinklers, accessibility for handicapped people that might be renting out the space. So while
Rest, all the things that,
yes,
from that what are the things you need to make sure that every safety precaution has been met,
yeah.
and exceeded from that perspective. You don't want to find out the hard way that you've missed something.
And there's no such thing as a stupid question, right? You should be asking questions so you're blue in the face, especially if it's the first time you're investing in this type of property, or if it's the first time you're investing in this specific region, part of the country, whatever you want to call it. You really have to, kind of go back to school, if you will, and make sure that you've done your homework and that there's going to be no surprises, right? Like a multifamily in Charleston, South Carolina, and a single family in Vernon, Connecticut are going to be vastly different from zoning and regulation. So just because you've done this before, from an investing in real estate perspective, don't think that you have it all figured out. There's so many questions to ask and things to learn. And an investor that's an expert in this kind of thing, is an investor that's going to be extremely successful.
Well, and we touched on code enforcement, and then the word permit comes up.
Hmm.
Have those permits been properly filed,
Yeah,
and have they been followed through the entire process and signed off on? Did they do the plumbing inspection? Did they do the electric inspection? Or do they have to come in and tear the sheetrock down now and show that it was done
yeah.
properly, hopefully properly?
Yes,
So
exactly.
those are I mean, that's where you want to, like we came back to it. The code enforcement officer in the acquisition phase is your friend. After that, and you find things, he's no longer your friend.
Exactly. So use him while you got him, right? While he's your ally, while he's on your side.
Good
Yeah,
skills for
yeah.
sure.
The last part of the pre-purchase process that we want to discuss, try to say that 5 times fast. But anyways, licensing and registration requirements. These are going to be huge for you as an investor. Uh, do you have the licenses in place to actually do this, right? There's one thing to say that you're a real estate investor. It's another thing to have the proper licensing, for that state or town or wherever, you want to invest in next.
And it's true, and there's certain towns, I know this is your neck of the woods, Connecticut and Hartford and Bridgeport have certain requirements for you to be licensed, and we may not have that in the state of
Yeah.
Maine, and I know that we have very loose even inspections. So those are the things that you really want to make sure that you've used a licensed plumbing,
Yep.
a plumber, you've used a licensed roofer, and all, and you want to make sure even while these people are on your property doing the work, not only are they insured, but they're following OSHA.
Yes.
OSHA's also a bad four-letter word that if you don't go about it the right way, that will come back and bite you in the rear
What are
end.
some other bad four-letter words? Are you familiar with?
Spit.
Duck. Lastly, from a licensing perspective, though, when you're talking about the property management side of things, Suzanne mentioned that, our studio is based out of Connecticut. RCN Capital's home base is in this state. So we're just using examples from Connecticut. Obviously, like Suzanne mentioned, she's from Maine. They can vary state to state. But for example, Connecticut requires a property managers and firms that actually collect rent to hold a valid real estate broker's license. So it's little things like that you just really need to make sure. It's countless hours, it's late nights, but it's all worth it when you secure that property. And like you said, you can rest your head on your pillow, at night and just realize I've done everything I've needed to from a legal perspective, from a licensing perspective. Everything is in place and where it needs to be. And now I just have to let that money roll in because I have a successful investment property in my portfolio.
So I happen to be a licensed real estate broker, and some of the things that you want to do, that when your security deposit needs to be an escrow account. That's not an account that you can tap into and borrow against. That is not your money that's sitting in there. And in some states, you may or may not have to actually pay them interest for the duration of that time. So there's a lot of things that go into protecting yourself and the proper licensing
Yeah.
that can really create a problem for you if you don't follow through.
It's great having your you as an asset for the podcast with your expertise, Susanna. It's one thing coming from me, but for somebody that actually goes through it and has seen the best and worst case scenarios, I'm sure, at a myriad of different properties. So we appreciate the insight you can give to our audience regarding
I
that.
mean, really set up the escrow account. And if you always hear the stories about someone who borrowed against the escrow or did stuff or that wrote, I mean, there's significant
Yeah,
penalties if you don't go about this the right way.
that's a no-no.
And we are in two very different states. Where I live in West Bath, we don't have to have a plumbing or electric inspection before they close the walls in, but you do in Portland.
Yep.
So it truly is town by town, state by state, and you want to make sure that you understand all of those requirements down to a T.
Yep. I think that's a pretty thorough conversation and a good spot to end part one of this week's episode. We've been happily discussing the pre-purchase things that all investors need to be aware of. Come back for part two. We'll talk about post-purchase things and continue this great conversation. Suzanne's going to lend more of her expertise, and we'll be hopefully teaching you some more things that you'll take with you throughout your investing career. Thank you so much for joining us on part one of Uncontested Investing.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Uncontested Investing. Questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow REI Inc. magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook and RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time.